Summer, 1940. Across the airfields of northern France, the Luftwaffe stood poised for the conquest of Britain. The roar of Daimler-Benz engines echoed through the morning haze as pilots, confident and sunburned, lounged beside their silver-gray fighters. Messerschmitt Bf-109s, the pride of German engineering. Their instructors called them the Eagles of the Reich. Their commanders told them the English would fall within weeks. Oberleutnant Hans Keller sat on the wing of his aircraft, a cigarette between his fingers, watching the mechanics fit fresh ammunition into the wing cannons. His fighter bore 27 victory marks, each painted neatly beneath the cockpit. "England will be the same as France," he said to his wingman, grinning. "Quick and clean. Their Spitfires are toys. Elegant? Yes, but fragile." The air smelled of oil and heat. The channel lay beyond the fields, a narrow strip of water glinting beneath the sun. It no longer seemed a barrier. Goering's words still echoed in the briefings. "We will sweep the RAF from the sky. The invasion will follow. The Reich will stretch to the Atlantic." Across the sea, in the rolling green of southern England, another airfield stirred to life. Sergeant Alan Briggs of the Royal Air Force leaned over the open cockpit of his Spitfire, feeling the hum of its Merlin engine as ground crew made final checks. The aircraft, sleek and almost delicate in its curves, seemed to breathe beneath his hands. "She's a dancer," his mechanic said, tapping the fuselage. "But she won't forgive a heavy step." Briggs smiled faintly. He knew what they were up against. The Messerschmitts climbed faster, dove harder, and carried more firepower. But he also knew what the RAF had: discipline, home ground, and a secret the Germans had not yet discovered. The first alarms came at midday. Radar screens flickered. Operators called out headings, altitudes, numbers. "Rate approaching Dover, 80 plus." Bells clanged across the fields. Pilots sprinted for their aircraft, pulling on gloves and helmets as engines howled to life. Keller's formation crossed the French coast in perfect symmetry, 12 Bf-109s climbing toward the English shoreline, sunlight flashing off their wings. Radio chatter crackled. "Maintain formation. Protect the bombers. Strike fast and break away." Below, the channel sparkled, deceptively peaceful. Then, dark dots appeared ahead, climbing to intercept. "Spitfires." "They're smaller than I expected," Keller muttered, almost amused. He pushed the throttle forward. The Messerschmitt surged ahead, engine screaming. In the sky above Dover, the two forces met like colliding storms. Contrails crossed, engines roared, and the first tracer rounds cut the air. Keller locked onto a Spitfire, fired a burst, saw it roll away, and vanish into a cloud. He followed, fast, precise. But as he entered the turn, something felt wrong. The Spitfire was there again, impossibly close, looping inside his arc. Keller tried to tighten his turn. The slat snapped open. The plane shuddered. His advantage in speed became a curse. "Verdammt!" he shouted, diving out of the fight. The Englishman followed for a moment, then broke off, deliberate, controlled. Keller pulled up, breathing hard. He had lost sight of his opponent, and worse, his confidence. When he landed that evening, the mechanics found bullet holes in his wing. His commander demanded an explanation. "They turned inside me," Keller said quietly. "I couldn't follow." Across the channel, Briggs landed on an airfield streaked with oil and smoke. 2 of his squadron were missing, but the others returned alive. He climbed from the cockpit, legs trembling, and looked west, toward the enemy's coast, still visible through the haze. "They're fast," he said to his wingman, "but they don't know how to fight slow." That night, as the wind swept across the English cliffs, both men, separated by the same strip of sea, wrote in their logbooks the same unspoken thought. For the first time, the Luftwaffe had met an enemy it could not outrun. The morning haze over southern England was the color of gunmetal. The Thames reflected nothing but smoke and tension. From the rooftops of London, spotters stared upward into the pale sky, where the first contrails of the day already began to form. The sirens had not yet sounded, but the sound of distant engines, low, steady, growing, rolled across the city like the approach of a storm. At Biggin Hill, the air raid bell split the morning calm. Pilots sprinted for their aircraft, throwing on harnesses and helmets. The crews had stopped joking days ago. Now, each scramble was a silent ritual. Flight Sergeant Alan Briggs climbed into his Spitfire, his motions automatic. The ground crew pulled away the chocks. The Merlin engine ignited with a deep, living roar. "Squadron up, intercepting over the estuary, Angels 20. Crackled the radio. The Spitfires took off in twos, wheels lifting through the mist. Within minutes, they were climbing through 10,000 feet, their wings cutting the clouds in clean arcs. Ahead, the channel glimmered faintly, dotted with sunlight and shadows. Briggs adjusted his oxygen mask. Blue section, stay tight. They'll have height on us. From his cockpit, the sky looked infinite, but he could already sense them. The incoming formation, a dark ribbon moving fast from the southeast. It was an image every pilot knew by heart. The blocky silhouettes of bombers, flanked by the lean, angular shapes of Messerschmitt Bf-109s. Inside one of those 109s, Hans Keller checked his altimeter and smiled. Target ahead. Bombers will strike London docks first. We'll clear their path. His voice was steady, confident, but the memory of the previous engagement still lingered like smoke in the back of his mind. The moment when a Spitfire had outturned him, danced around him as if mocking his precision. He had dismissed it then as luck. He would not make the same mistake again. At 20,000 feet, the two formations met. The British fighters came from the sun, a glittering swarm that split and scattered like shards of light. The first German bomber shuddered under bursts of gunfire. Keller rolled, dove after a Spitfire, and fired a short burst. Tracers ripped through the air, but the Englishman twisted away with impossible grace. Don't follow him into a turn! His leader's voice snapped through the radio. Stay fast! Stay high! Keller hesitated. The Spitfire was right there, glinting silver against the blue. Instinct screamed to chase, but training said otherwise. He pulled up instead, banking toward the sun. Below, Briggs looped beneath a bomber, his gun spitting fire. Smoke burst from the Heinkel's engine, and the bomber peeled away, falling toward the sea. His heart pounded, the world narrowing to the dance of machine and motion. Then the warning shout came over the radio. Watch your tail, Blue One! He jerked the stick hard right. Bullets tore through the space he'd just occupied. A Messerschmitt shot past, climbing sharply. Briggs caught a glimpse of the black crosses on its wings, the glint of its canopy. The chase began. Keller pulled his fighter into a climb, using speed as his shield. The Spitfire followed, matching him turn for turn. He tried to shake it with a dive, the engine screaming at full throttle. But as he leveled, the Englishman was still there, closer now, matching every move as if reading his thoughts. He felt a sting of panic. The Bf-109 was supposed to dominate in speed and climb. Yet somehow, the Spitfire refused to be left behind. Keller rolled violently, diving toward the bombers below. The G-forces crushed him into his seat. He barely registered the tracers that streaked past his canopy. At last, he broke free. The Spitfire overshot, rolling into the clouds. Keller leveled out, gasping for breath. His hands were slick with sweat. On the other side of the sky, Briggs was fighting his own exhaustion. His arms ached from the stick's resistance. The turns, the climbs, the dives, each demanded absolute control. He saw flashes of London below, rooftops, smoke columns, searchlights pointing into daylight. Somewhere beneath that haze were families crouched in basements, waiting for news that would never come. Fuel low, his wingman called out. Copy that. Make one more pass, then home. Briggs spotted a lone bomber limping toward the channel, its right engine smoking. He dived, lined up the shot, and pressed the trigger. The Spitfire shuddered as the guns fired. The Heinkel erupted in flame, breaking apart before it hit the water. As he climbed back into formation, his radio crackled again. Command reports. German losses heavy today. Good work, boys. But the tone in the voice was weary. Victory here was measured in survival, not numbers. Back in France, Keller landed his damaged Messerschmitt in near silence. The mechanic swarmed over the plane, but he stayed in the cockpit, staring ahead. The paint on his fuselage was scorched, the left wing peppered with holes. His squadron commander approached. Another close one? Keller nodded slowly. They're not what we were told, he said. The Spitfire. It turns like smoke. The commander's face hardened. Then stop chasing ghosts. Dive, fire, and climb away. No more turning fights. That's an order. That night, Keller sat alone outside the barracks, smoking. Across the channel, he could see faint flashes where the bombs fell over London. The air was still, heavy. Somewhere out there, he knew, was the English pilot who had nearly bested him again. On the other side of that same sky, Alan Briggs leaned against his Spitfire's warm fuselage, listening to the ticking of the cooling engine. The horizon still glowed faint red from the fires of London. He closed his eyes and whispered to no one. We held them today. But he knew the next morning would bring more sirens, more climbs, more duels above the clouds. And somewhere, another Messerschmitt pilot would be waiting, still believing that speed alone could win the war. The weather over the channel had turned deceptive. From the ground, the sky looked calm, soft, gray, almost gentle. But above 10,000 feet, the clouds thickened into walls of white fog that swallowed aircraft whole. For the Royal Air Force, it was both danger and opportunity. For the Luftwaffe, it was a snare waiting to close. By early August, the Battle of Britain had become a rhythm of exhaustion. Every day followed the same pattern: radar warnings, frantic scrambles, combat above the coast, silence by dusk. Both sides were learning, adapting, calculating. Yet beneath the statistics, something subtler was unfolding. A shift in the way the RAF fought. At Biggin Hill, a new tactic was being tested quietly among the squadrons. The pilots called it the trap. Flight Sergeant Alan Briggs sat in the briefing room as Wing Commander Dowson drew lines on the blackboard with a piece of chalk. "They're faster. We all know that. They'll always dive away. So let them. That's the key." He underlined a curve on the board, a looping arc that spiraled downward. "You don't follow the dive. You feint the pursuit, then turn inside. They'll come back around, thinking they've shaken you, and walk straight into your guns." Briggs frowned. "It sounds like a trick." "It is," Dowson said simply. "We're fighting wolves. You don't outrun wolves, you bait them." That afternoon, the sky was heavy with humidity, the kind that blurred the horizon. Briggs taxied his Spitfire across the damp tarmac, the scent of wet grass mixing with oil fumes. "Control to blue section," the radio crackled. "Raid detected, crossing the coast near Folkestone. Strength estimated 60 plus. Climb to Angels 18. Within minutes, the air was alive with motion. The Spitfires climbed in tight formation, their slender wings slicing through low cloud. Above the vapor, the sun burned bright, blinding. Somewhere beyond that white glare, the Messerschmitts were coming. Hans Keller led his swarm that day, 4 aircraft moving in perfect diamond formation. His confidence had returned, though something in his chest still remembered the disquiet of that first loss. He had been briefed to keep the fight vertical, climb and dive, never turn. "The English cannot catch you if you use your speed," his commander had said. "Their mistake is pride. They always turn to show skill. Don't play their game." But as the first Spitfires appeared above the bombers, the pattern shifted. The English came head-on, split in pairs, then vanished into the cloud layer below. "Where did they go?" Keller called. "They're beneath us," Keller answered, scanning the haze. "Hold formation." The clouds opened like curtains, and suddenly the Spitfires were back, bursting from below, guns blazing. The bombers scattered. Tracer rounds ripped through the air. Keller dove instinctively, but the English fighters didn't follow. They climbed instead, looping back to meet the Messerschmitts as they emerged from their dives. It was the trap. Keller saw one of his comrades roll into the climb too late. A Spitfire curved gracefully beneath him, its elliptical wings flashing in the sunlight. 2 short bursts, and the German aircraft disintegrated in flame. Keller cursed and pulled up sharply, but even as he regained height, the air seemed full of ghosts, Spitfires appearing and vanishing through the clouds, their silver forms gliding effortlessly through vapor. On the ground, the radar operators watched the shifting chaos on their screens. "Raid breaking up," one shouted. "Multiple contacts dropping fast. They're scattering." By the time Briggs returned to base, his guns were empty. His aircraft bore fresh holes along the right wing, but he had seen one Messerschmitt fall burning into the channel. He climbed from the cockpit, the adrenaline still humming in his veins. "Did it work?" asked Dowson, meeting him on the runway. Briggs nodded. "They fell for it. Twice." Dowson allowed himself a brief smile. "Good. Let them think we're chasing them. The more they run, the easier they break." Across the sea, Keller landed hard on a makeshift strip near Calais. The ground crew rushed forward as his engine coughed and died. He climbed out slowly, staring at the bullet scars along the fuselage. Quiller's plane had not returned. The debriefing was tense. "You chased the bait," the commander snapped. "You were warned about their traps." Keller said nothing. He thought of the clouds, how the Spitfires had seemed to move inside them like ghosts, how every dive he made turned against him. He could no longer deny what he had seen. The English weren't just surviving, they were learning faster. That night, as rain pattered against the barracks roof, Keller opened his flight log. He hesitated, then wrote a single line beneath the day's entry. "They are not prey, they are hunters." In Kent, the pilots of Biggin Hill gathered in the dim light of the mess hall. The tea was cold, the laughter forced, but the tension had shifted. They no longer spoke of surviving. only of improving. Briggs sat near the window, watching the lightning flicker over the channel. "They'll come again tomorrow," said one of the younger pilots. Briggs nodded slowly. "And when they do, we'll be waiting in the clouds." Far above, thunder rolled, soft, distant, like the echo of engines. The sky that had once belonged to the Germans was beginning to change. It no longer obeyed speed or firepower. It obeyed patience. And for the first time since the war began, the hunters of the Luftwaffe were discovering what it meant to be hunted. By mid-August, the air over the channel had become a graveyard for ambition. The water below glittered peacefully, but the sky above it was filled with wrecks, twisted metal drifting down like blackened leaves, oil fires spreading thin rainbows across the sea. The war had become routine, mechanical, yet more personal with every engagement. Each duel in the sky was no longer about nations or orders. It was about survival, about pride, about two men meeting in the air and refusing to yield. That morning began with silence. The weather was clear, the air sharp and cold. From the cliffs of Dover, you could see the French coast, a gray smudge on the horizon. The channel was calm, deceptive, like the calm before a storm that both sides knew was inevitable. At Biggin Hill, Alan Briggs sat in the briefing room with his squadron, listening as Dowson tapped the pointer against the wall map. "They've shifted tactics again," he said. "Fewer bombers, more fighter sweeps. They're testing us, seeing how quickly we respond, how high we climb, how long we stay in the air. They want to wear us down." Someone muttered, "They're doing a good job of it." Dowson's eyes swept the room. "Fatigue isn't an excuse up there. You rest when they stop coming." An hour later, Briggs was climbing through the sky. The sunlight glared against his canopy, turning everything gold and white. The channel shimmered below, and far ahead, the radar had already marked the intruders, 12, maybe 15, flying high. "Blue section, climb to Angels 20. Stay tight. No chasing strays," came Dowson's voice over the radio. But even as Briggs acknowledged, he knew the pattern. No plan survived contact with the enemy. Once the shooting started, order dissolved into instinct. Across the sea, Hans Keller led his formation from Calais. He'd stopped believing in Goering's promises of victory. Now he flew for his men, the few who were left. His squadron had been cut in half in a month. The replacements were younger, nervous, their eyes darting too quickly over the gauges. Keller tried to sound confident. "Remember what you've been told. Don't turn with them. Dive through, shoot, and climb away. Keep your speed. It's your only friend." He didn't say what he truly thought, that the Spitfire had become a nightmare he couldn't shake. Every time he saw one glinting in the sun, it felt like déjà vu, a memory of losing control, of watching his instruments blur as the English pilot slipped inside his turn. At 20,000 feet, the formations collided. The first pass was clean and violent. Keller's guns flashed, tracers slicing through the empty sky. Briggs rolled left, the Spitfire vibrating under the pressure. His vision blurred for an instant, a heartbeat of darkness, then cleared. He looped upward, caught the Messerschmitt in his sights, and fired. The burst missed, but Keller felt it, the hiss of bullets slicing past, the tremor in the air. He dived, pulling the 109 into a long arc, relying on its superior acceleration. The Englishman followed. The duel began. From the ground, they were just two dots spiraling across the blue. From inside the cockpits, they were locked in an invisible cage. Each tried to outguess the other, each using every ounce of training and instinct. Keller climbed steeply, forcing Briggs to follow. The G-force crushed them both, blood draining from their eyes. Then Keller rolled over into a dive, hoping to make the Englishman overshoot. But Briggs anticipated the move. He cut the throttle, turned inside the dive, and came up behind him. The radio erupted with shouts. "He's on you, Keller. Brake right." Keller pulled hard, the wings groaning. The slats snapped open. The plane shuddered on the edge of stall. He was losing control again. Panic flared, not fear, but fury. He threw the stick forward, dove for the clouds. The Spitfire followed relentlessly. Briggs's breathing was harsh inside his mask. The 109 ahead of him was weaving, trying to recover speed. He fired a short burst, missed. Another. This time, sparks erupted from the Messerschmitt's tail. Black smoke trailed behind it. "Got him," Briggs whispered. But Keller wasn't done. He dove straight for the sea, skimming the waves so low that spray streaked across his canopy. The Spitfire stayed above, waiting. Briggs didn't dare follow, not at that altitude. Instead, he climbed and circled. The Messerschmitt began to pull up, slower now, engine sputtering. Briggs rolled inverted and dived again, firing one final burst. The tracers found their mark. The 109 lurched, caught fire, and broke apart before Keller could bail out. Briggs pulled up sharply, heart pounding. He watched the fragments tumble into the channel. For a moment, he expected to feel triumph. Instead, there was only silence. When he landed, the ground crew was waiting, grinning, congratulating him. But Briggs said nothing. He climbed from the cockpit, peeled off his gloves, and stared out toward the distant line of sea and sky. Dowson joined him. "You got another today. That makes 6. Briggs didn't answer. He thought of the man he'd fought, the precision of his moves, the desperation in his dive. He wondered if he'd known, in those final seconds, that he was already defeated by the very thing he trusted most, his speed. That night, as dusk fell over the airfield, Briggs sat alone by the hangar. The last light of day glimmered on the Spitfire's curved wings. The wind off the channel carried the faint smell of salt and fuel. Somewhere far across the water, another German squadron was preparing for dawn. The duel above the channel had ended, but the lesson of it would echo in every cockpit from that day on. Speed was a weapon, only if it could be controlled. And in the skies over England, control now belonged to the patient, the cunning, and the calm. The Luftwaffe had lost one more pilot. The RAF had gained one more truth. And the war for the air was far from over. September 1940. The sky over southern England no longer belonged to anyone. The Luftwaffe still came, sometimes in massive waves, sometimes in probing strikes, but always they met resistance. Quiet, disciplined, relentless. The British called it endurance. The Germans called it defiance. Either way, it was beginning to tilt the balance of the war. At Biggin Hill, the airfield smelled of fuel and fatigue. The ground crew worked through drizzle, their hands blackened with oil, repairing bullet-riddled wings and cracked fuselages. Pilots slept in their uniforms, boots still on, ready for the next scramble. The war had ceased to feel like glory. It had become routine survival. Alan Briggs sat at a wooden table in the operations hut, watching rain streak down the window. Across from him, Wing Commander Dowson studied the day's losses. 4 aircraft destroyed, 2 pilots missing. The numbers no longer shocked anyone. They just accumulated, like the quiet toll of time. "Do you ever think," Briggs said, his voice low, "that they might just stop coming?" Dowson didn't look up. "They can't afford to. If they stop, they lose. If we stop, we die. That's the difference." A runner burst in with a message. "Sir, radar reports incoming. Small formation, 20 miles off the coast. Altitude 12,000. Dowson stood. "Small formation means fighters. They're testing again. Briggs, take your section. Don't engage unless you have the advantage. You know the rule." Briggs nodded, grabbed his helmet, and ran into the rain. Moments later, the Spitfires lifted into the air, their wingtips cutting through the mist like blades through silk. As they climbed, the clouds thinned. The sun broke through in pale streaks, turning the sea below into rippled silver. "Blue section, hold altitude," Briggs ordered. "We'll wait for them to make the first move." The radar had been right. The German formation came into view. 8 Bf-109s, sleek and sharp, flying tight, their yellow noses glinting in the light. At their head was a new leader, Oberfeldwebel Martin Köhler, recently transferred from Calais. He'd been briefed about Keller's death, and he carried that name like a weight. The men whispered that Keller had been reckless, lured into turning fights he couldn't win. Köhler intended to restore the squadron's honor. "Remember," he told his men over the radio, "climb, strike, and leave. Don't chase. The English will try to trap you." But the English were already one step ahead. Briggs watched the 109s approach. "They're high and fast, same as always," he said into the mic. "Let them think we're climbing too slow." He eased the throttle just enough to make the Spitfires look sluggish on approach. The Germans, confident as ever, began their dive. The attack came like a hammer, tracers flashing, engines howling. Briggs rolled hard, avoiding the first burst, then pulled up sharply. "Now!" he shouted. His section broke formation, splitting in pairs. The Spitfires turned inside the German arc with impossible grace, their wings cutting tight circles that no Messerschmitt could match. Köhler saw it too late. "Break off! Don't turn with them," he barked. But one of his younger pilots, eager for the kill, ignored the command. He tried to follow a Spitfire through the turn, and the trap snapped shut. Briggs rolled in behind him, fired a short burst. The German fighter erupted in flame and spun into the sea. "Blue one down," Briggs said calmly. Köhler gritted his teeth. "Damn them. They fight like swans, slow to rise Impossible to touch. He yanked the stick, climbing back toward the sun. The Spitfires followed, staying just far enough below to bait him into diving again. Every time he tried, they slid away, circling back through the clouds like ghosts. On the ground below, London's skyline burned. Columns of smoke twisted upward, black against the pale sky. Yet above it all, the air was ruled not by firepower, but by finesse. Briggs felt it in his bones, the difference between his Spitfire and theirs. The Germans had built a Predator that demanded precision and punished hesitation. The British had built something alive, a fighter that responded to touch, that seemed to know what its pilot intended before he did. "Red 2, fuel check," he called. "Half gone, sir." "Right. We'll break off. Let them run." Köhler watched as the British fighters disappeared into the clouds, refusing to pursue. It infuriated him. "Cowards," he muttered, but deep down he knew it wasn't cowardice, it was control, the very thing his men lacked. When he landed, the debriefing was silent. The Luftwaffe's command was growing uneasy. Reports spoke of Spitfires that could turn inside any fighter they had, of British tactics that changed daily, of invisible traps that turned speed into death. In Berlin, the analysts called it the maneuverability gap. On paper, the Bf-109 was still superior in speed and climb. But war wasn't fought on paper. It was fought in seconds, in turns, in instincts. And in those moments, the Spitfire ruled. At Biggin Hill, Dowson gathered his men after the sortie. "The engineers say they're improving the Spitfire's engine," he said. "More power at high altitude. The Germans won't have it easy for much longer." Briggs looked at the map, where new red pins marked the day's kills. He should have felt pride, but he didn't. "They'll adapt too," he said quietly. "They always do." Dowson gave a tired smile. "Then we adapt faster." That night, Briggs sat by the hangar, writing in his logbook under the dim glow of a lantern. They came fast, as always, but speed failed them again. The Spitfire is not just an aircraft, it's a conversation between man and sky. Across the channel, Köhler wrote his own entry. "The English plane turns before it's told. We cannot fight what we cannot predict. Two men, two enemies, both staring at the same sky, and both beginning to understand that the war would not be won by engines alone. It would be won by the hands that flew them.